The empty streets of Vareth, the twin suns were setting over the broken city of Vareth, their dim light falling across empty streets and silent ruins. Dust floated in the dry wind, whispering through shattered windows and broken towers. Once this world was filled with laughter, color and songs, but now it was only echoes and silence. Lyra walked slowly along the cracked road, holding her baby close to her chest. The child's soft breathing was weak, almost lost in the wind. Her thin arms trembled as she tried to keep the small blanket tight around him. The baby's skin glowed faintly under the dying light, a soft violet hue that marked him as Varethian. He whimpered a tiny sound, and Lyra pressed him closer, whispering, "Just a little longer, my star." Her feet were bare, her clothes torn from many days of wandering. Around her, the city ignored her completely. Tall figures of other aliens walked by, their faces hidden, their eyes cold. Shops closed their metal doors when they saw her coming. Soldiers in dark armor stood at corners, watching her with no expression. To them, she was not a mother, not a person, just another beggar from the losing side. The war had ended months ago, but peace had not returned. Vareth was broken, its people divided, its skies filled with the smoke of forgotten battles. Food was rare, medicine rarer, and kindness almost extinct. Lyra had lost her husband in the war, her family in the famine, and now she fought only for her baby. She stopped near an old market square, where the air smelled faintly of burnt metal and dust. An old vendor robot blinked lazily, its power low. "Baby formula," she whispered, placing 3 small coins on the counter. The robot scanned the coins, its mechanical voice flat. "Insufficient credits." She stared at the small pile of metal and whispered again, "Please, it's for my child." The robot made a buzzing sound and went silent, its power dying completely. She stood there for a moment, staring at the dark machine, her shoulders shaking silently. Around her, no one stopped. No one looked. The world kept walking, stepping around her as if she were invisible. The baby cried weakly, a sound too soft to make anyone turn. She rocked him slowly, whispering lullabies in a broken voice, songs from a home that no longer existed. The cold began to grow sharper as the suns dipped lower. The wind howled through the empty buildings, carrying the sound of doors slamming and glass breaking. Lyra looked up at the sky, her eyes tired but still holding a trace of hope. She had heard rumors, whispers in the refugee camps, that humans had returned to this part of space. Many feared them, some hated them. But she remembered the old stories that said humans had once brought light where darkness grew, that they had saved worlds no one else cared about. Her baby's breathing grew slower, and panic filled her heart. She looked around, desperate, running toward the faint glow of a street lamp. There she found an abandoned bench and sat down, her hands trembling as she held the child close. The baby's small fingers tried to grasp hers. Weak and cold, tears filled her eyes, falling silently onto his face. She whispered, "Don't leave me, not you too." Her voice cracked, and the words turned into sobs swallowed by the wind. For hours she sat there, rocking the child under the pale light, her mind drifting between hope and despair. Every sound in the darkness made her flinch. Distant engines, the stomp of boots or the hum of drones. She wished for a miracle. But miracles had stopped coming to Vareth long ago above her in the night sky. A faint streak of light appeared like a falling star. She didn't know it was a ship entering orbit. She didn't know that inside that ship was a human officer named Elias Ward, and that his arrival would soon change her fate. She just stared at the light and whispered, "Please, let someone hear us." Her whisper vanished into the cold air. But far above the clouds, someone did hear. The human ship's scanners picked up life signs among the ruins. The signal was weak, but it carried the faint heartbeat of a child. Commander Elias leaned forward in his seat, studying the data. "Civilian life detected?" he asked. The crew confirmed it quietly, and he frowned. This sector was supposed to be empty. Abandoned after the ceasefire, something inside him stirred, a sense of duty. Or maybe something deeper. He gave the order. "Prepare a drop shuttle, we're going down." Back on the surface, Lyra's eyes closed slowly as exhaustion took over. The baby's breathing steadied a little, his small body warm against hers above them. A faint light moved across the sky, growing brighter. She didn't see it, but her child's small hand reached toward it. As if sensing the coming change, the light flickered, cutting through the darkness of Vareth's night. And in that cold silence, hope began to return, not with words, but with the sound of engines descending through the clouds. The city of ruins waited. The mother held her child. And somewhere in the sky, a human heart was already on its way to meet theirs. The human arrival. The night sky of Vareth glowed faintly as a small human shuttle broke through the clouds. Its engines hummed softly, cutting across the silence of the ruined city. Inside, Commander Elias Ward stood by the window. Watching the broken world below, he had seen war zones before, burned colonies and silent cities. But something about Vareth felt different. It was too quiet, too forgotten, as if even time itself had stopped caring. The shuttle touched down on an empty landing pad covered in dust. Old banners hung torn from nearby towers, their colors faded by years of sun and smoke. The air was heavy, dry and cold, filled with the smell of metal and ash. Elias adjusted his helmet and stepped out. Boots crunching on broken glass, a small team followed him, their flashlights cutting narrow beams of light through the fog. They moved slowly through the streets, scanning the area for life. Every shadow looked like a ghost, every noise like a cry. The local species watched from the corners. Faces hidden, their eyes followed the humans, full of fear and mistrust. Elias could feel their silence pressing against him like a wall. He knew why. They still remembered the war. To them, humans were both saviors and monsters, depending on who you asked. As they reached the market district, Elias noticed something strange. The scanners showed a weak life signal nearby, small, fragile, fading. He motioned for his team to stay alert and followed the signal into a narrow alley. The walls were cracked and covered in graffiti, messages of hate and hope mixed together. Then he heard it, soft and trembling, the faint cry of a baby carried by the wind. His heart skipped a beat. He moved faster, light sweeping the shadows until it fell upon a small figure under a broken street lamp. It was a woman, kneeling beside a metal bench, her head bowed, her arms wrapped around a small bundle. She didn't move when his light touched her. For a moment, Elias thought she might be dead. But then he heard it again, the sound of a baby's weak cry. Muffled by the blanket, he stepped closer, slowly, lowering his weapon. "Hey," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The woman looked up, her face pale and tired. Her eyes reflecting the light. She was thin, her skin marked by faint bioluminescent lines typical of Varethians. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Please, no more soldiers." Elias shook his head gently. "I'm not one of them." He crouched down, taking off his helmet so she could see his face. The cold air touched his skin, but he didn't care. The baby made a small sound, and he smiled faintly. "It's okay, little one," he murmured, his voice low and calm. The woman blinked in confusion, unsure what to make of him. Her people had been told humans were cruel, selfish, dangerous. Yet this one looked at her not with hate but with something else, pity, maybe even kindness. She hesitated, then pulled back the blanket slightly. The baby's small violet face peeked out, eyes half closed, skin pale from hunger. Elias felt a lump in his throat. He had seen soldiers wounded in battle, but nothing had ever looked this fragile, this innocent. "What happened here?" he asked quietly. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "They said the war was over, but for us, it never ended." She explained how her people lost, how aid was denied, how her husband died in the last bombing, how she walked for days searching for food, selling everything, even her wedding ring. Her last coins couldn't buy formula and no one would help her. She looked at him with tired eyes, whispering, "I thought the stars forgot us." Elias listened silently, feeling something deep within him twist painfully. He had joined the human fleet to protect life, not watch it suffer. And yet here was proof that peace had failed. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small ration container. It wasn't much, but it was real food, nutrient paste, clean water, and a blanket. He handed it to her, but she hesitated, staring at his hand. "You're human," she said softly. "Why are you helping me?" He smiled sadly. "Because you asked for help." The simple answer seemed to confuse her, but then her lips trembled. Tears filled her eyes as she took the pack with shaking hands. She opened it carefully, pouring a little formula into a bottle and feeding her child. The baby drank slowly, weak but alive for the first time in many nights. The sound of soft sucking filled the air instead of crying. Elias sat down on the cold ground beside them. He didn't care about the mud or the dust. He just watched the mother cradle her child in that moment. He didn't see an alien enemy, he saw a family. He thought of his own sister back on Earth, who had just given birth. How easily life could be lost in the silence of forgotten worlds. Above them, the stars glowed faintly, reflecting in the puddles of the ruined city. Somewhere in the distance, a patrol drone buzzed. Searching for curfew breakers, Elias ignored it, knowing he was already breaking a dozen regulations by being there, but he didn't care. He reached into his communicator and whispered, "Mark this zone. Civilian survivors present," his command center replied coldly. "Not priority, Commander, move on." He turned it off without answering. As the baby finished the bottle, the woman looked at him again, her voice soft. Filled with gratitude and confusion. "What's your name?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Elias. Just Elias." She nodded weakly. "I'm Lyra." Their eyes met. Two strangers from different worlds, united by one silent cry for help. The night wind blew softly through the ruins, and for the first time in a long while, Vareth's darkness felt a little less cold in the distance. The stars shimmered brighter as if watching, waiting for what would come next. Neither of them knew it yet. But this meeting would change more than just their lives. It would shake the heart of the entire galaxy. The choice. The pale morning light crept slowly through the broken towers of Vareth. Smoke from the lower city hung in the air like gray mist. Lyra sat near the edge of the ruined bench, her baby asleep in her arms. The soft hum of a nearby generator filled the silence, the only sound left in a dead district. Elias stood a few feet away, checking his communicator again. His orders were clear: survey, report, move on. But his mind kept going back to the small child in Lyra's arms. Every time the baby coughed, he felt his chest tighten. He knew that without real medical help, the infant would not last another day. He looked at Lyra, thin, exhausted, her clothes soaked in dust and tears. She was not a soldier, not a fighter, just a mother trying to survive in a world that had turned its back on her. He wondered how many others like her were hiding in the ruins, unseen, unheard, forgotten. His training told him to stay detached, but his heart refused. Lyra opened her eyes slowly and saw him standing there. The morning light reflected softly in her faintly glowing eyes. She spoke in a quiet voice. "You should leave before they find you." Elias frowned. "Who?" She looked away. "The patrols. They don't like humans here anymore. They say humans brought the war and left us to die." He knelt beside her, his armor creaking softly. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. "I came to see if anyone needed help." Her lips curved into a sad smile. "Everyone needs help here, but no one gives it." Her words struck him deeper than she knew. He reached into his bag again and took out a small medical scanner. Lyra flinched slightly, but he smiled gently. "It's okay. It won't hurt." He scanned the baby's chest, the small device beeping weakly. Dehydration, malnutrition, early fever. It was worse than he thought. He sighed quietly, feeling anger rise within him. This was not how peace was supposed to look. He sent another signal to his command, requesting a medical drop. The reply came almost instantly. "Negative, Commander Ward. Vareth refugees are classified as restricted aid zones." He clenched his jaw, staring at the cold message, "restricted aid zones." Two words that meant thousands of innocent lives would be left to die. He turned off the communicator, his voice low. "They don't see you as people." Lyra looked at him with tired eyes. "No one does." For a long moment, neither spoke. The city groaned softly around them, wind whistling through hollow buildings. Elias felt something shift inside him, a quiet decision forming. He looked at her, then at the baby, and said, "I can't leave you here." She blinked in confusion. "You... what?" "I said I'm not leaving you," he repeated. His tone steady, she shook her head quickly. "You'll get in trouble, they'll arrest you. Maybe worse." He smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'll be in good company." Lyra didn't know whether to cry or laugh. She had not seen kindness in so long that it felt unreal. For a moment, she wondered if this human was just another dream born from exhaustion. Elias rose to his feet and extended his hand toward her. "Come on," he said softly. "I know a place we can hide for now." Lyra looked at his gloved hand, hesitant, trembling all her life. She had been told that humans only took, never gave. But in that moment, she saw something else in his eyes, an honesty that made her believe again. Slowly, she placed her hand in his, and he helped her up. Her body was light, fragile, but her grip was strong, the grip of a mother who refused to give up. They walked through the narrow alleys, silent except for the baby's quiet breathing. Every step echoed through the ruins, every shadow felt alive. Elias led them through an old maintenance tunnel, its walls lined with cracked pipes and faded warning signs. He found an old security station still powered by emergency cells. The inside smelled of rust and oil, but it was dry, hidden, safe enough. He placed a small heater in the corner, its blue light spreading warmth. Lyra sat near it, wrapping the baby tighter, her eyes softening as she felt the warmth for the first time in days. Elias watched her quietly, then turned away, speaking to himself.
Command won't like this. But deep down, he already knew. He didn't care.
He opened a supply crate, pulling out ration packs, water, and a thin blanket. As he handed them to her, she whispered, "Why are you doing this?" He paused, looking at the small child sleeping peacefully now. "Because your child didn't start the war," he said. "And neither did you." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different. Not just pain, but something new, something almost forgotten, hope. She looked at him and said quietly, "Humans are strange." He smiled slightly. "So I've been told." Outside, distant engines roared as patrol drones swept the city skies. Elias checked his wrist monitor, scanning frequencies, looking for their patrol route. They would find the shuttle soon. And if they traced it back, he would be court-martialed. Still, he didn't move. He sat near the small heater, looking at the mother and child sleeping softly. He made his choice, and he would stand by it in that dim room. Surrounded by rusted metal and silence, something changed. A bond began to form, not of race or duty, but of simple humanity. The kind that survives wars, crosses stars, and refuses to die even in the darkest places. Elias looked up at the cracked ceiling, where faint light leaked through, and for the first time since the war, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. But peace never lasts long on Verith outside. The sky flashed red for a moment, a drone picking up unauthorized heat signatures. A quiet alarm blinked on Elias's communicator, warning him that someone was coming. He turned off the light and whispered, "Stay quiet." Lyra held her baby close, her breath trembling. Elias gripped his rifle, eyes fixed on the tunnel entrance. He had made his choice. Now he would face whatever came next. The hidden war, the cold wind returned the next evening, howling through the cracks of the ruined security station. Elias sat near the small heater, his armor dimmed to low power, watching the flickering blue light dance on the walls. Lyra slept beside him, her baby cradled safely in her arms, their breathing soft and steady. For a brief moment the world felt peaceful, but Elias knew that silence on Verith was never a good sign. He leaned back, staring at the faint light of his communicator, the red warning icon still blinking. It had been hours since the patrol drone passed, but the signal remained. Someone knew they were here, or worse, someone was coming. He opened his wrist scanner again. Trying to contact Orbit Command, the signal was jammed. Interference thick and deliberate. That meant only one thing. Someone down here didn't want humans to communicate. He turned off the display inside. His thoughts heavy. He had disobeyed orders before, but never like this. This time it wasn't for strategy or pride, it was for compassion. And compassion, he realized bitterly, was often treated like a crime in times of war. The baby stirred softly, letting out a small cry. Lyra opened her eyes, instantly alert, gently rocking him back to calm. Elias watched quietly, a small smile on his lips. "You have a good instinct," he said softly. She looked at him, tired but calm. Mothers learn quickly, or their children die. Her words were simple, but they cut deep. After a while, she spoke again, her voice low. "You shouldn't have stayed." Elias tilted his head. "You say that a lot." She shook her head slowly. "Because I mean it. This city isn't safe, not for humans." "Not anymore," he frowned. "You mean because of the war?" Lyra hesitated, then whispered, "No, because of what came after." She looked into the heater's flame, the reflection trembling in her glowing eyes. When the war ended, the High Council promised peace, but they lied. They used the peace to punish the weak. They called it justice. But it was revenge. Elias listened silently, his hands tightening on his knees. Lyra continued, "My people were accused of helping the wrong side, so they took everything, our homes, our food, even our names." Her voice shook, and she lowered her head. "They said our blood was cursed. They burned our clinics, Band-Aid, and left us to starve." She looked up at him again, her eyes glistening. "And now they blame you humans for giving them the power to do it." Elias frowned deeply. We ended the war, we offered supplies. Yes, she interrupted. But the supplies never reached us. The council kept them. They hoard the food, the medicine, everything. He stared at her in disbelief. You're saying your leaders kept the aid? Lyra nodded slowly. They decide who eats and who dies. The truth hit him like a cold wave. It wasn't just neglect, it was control. Human aid was being stolen and used as a weapon. And the ones suffering were mothers like Lyra, babies like hers, families buried under the name of peace. Elias rose to his feet, pacing slowly, his mind racing. He thought of the reports he had read back at command. Numbers, statistics, refugee counts, all tidy and clean, none of them showed this. None showed the broken streets, the starving children, or the lies told in the name of diplomacy. He turned to Lyra, his voice hard now. Do you know where the council stores the aid? She hesitated. Why? Because, he said, if I can show proof, command will have to act. She looked at him as if he were mad. They will kill you before you get close. He smiled faintly. Wouldn't be the first time someone tried. Lyra stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, You really are strange. Human, he grinned slightly. So I've heard. Later that night, they moved quietly through the back alleys. The sky was dark, covered in thick gray clouds. Elias wore his helmet again, his visor glowing faint green. Scanning for heat signatures, Lyra led the way, carrying her baby wrapped tightly to her chest. They passed ruined markets and collapsed buildings until they reached the heart of the old city. There, hidden behind tall concrete walls, stood a large building still powered. Its lights too bright for a place supposedly abandoned. That's the depot, Lyra whispered. They say only the council guards go inside. Elias nodded, adjusting his visor inside the walls. He could see movement, crates, hover trucks, security drones, boxes marked with the Human Alliance logo. His jaw tightened. Those are our supply crates. He zoomed in. The words Emergency Relief Earth Aid Division were clear on every box. He felt anger boil inside him. All those supplies meant to save lives were being hidden, traded, and sold. While children starved outside, suddenly, a bright beam cut across the street. A patrol drone spotted movement and locked onto them. Elias pushed Lyra behind a wall, raising his rifle. The drone fired a warning shot, plasma crackling against the stone. He aimed carefully and fired back. Hitting its sensor, the drone spun wildly, crashed into a wall and exploded in sparks. The blast echoed across the district. More lights turned on inside the depot. Alarms flashing red. Run! Elias shouted. Grabbing Lyra's arm, they sprinted through the dark alleys. The sound of engines and sirens behind them. The baby cried softly. Frightened by the noise, Lyra stumbled once, but Elias caught her before she fell. They ran until the lights faded. Hearts pounding, lungs burning. Finally, they stopped in an abandoned shelter. Collapsing to the floor, Lyra clutched her baby close, tears running down her cheeks. Elias leaned against the wall, breathing hard. He looked at her and said quietly, Now I've seen it with my own eyes. Lyra nodded slowly. And now you know why no one helps us outside. Distant sirens wailed. In that moment, Elias realized there was no turning back. He had uncovered a truth that could shake the peace treaties, and he knew what he had to do next. Expose the corruption. Save the mother and her child, even if it cost him everything. The night deepened, the baby slept once more. Elias looked out at the ruined city and whispered, This isn't peace. This is silence. And in that silence, a plan began to form. One that would bring light back to Verith and force the galaxy to see the truth it had chosen to ignore. The Forbidden Act. The night was cold again, colder than before. The kind of cold that made the metal walls groan and the air sting the skin. The ruins of Verith slept in uneasy silence, broken only by distant sirens and the hum of patrol engines far away. Inside an abandoned shelter, Commander Elias Ward sat beside a flickering light, his helmet lying on the dusty ground. Lyra and her baby were sleeping, curled up under a worn blanket, the heater running on the last bits of power he had left. He stared at them quietly, thinking about everything he had seen, the empty markets, the stolen supplies, the starving faces. He could not forget the words painted on those stolen crates. Earth Aid Division, shining like a cruel joke under the warehouse lights. All that food, all that medicine meant to save lives, and yet rotting behind guarded walls while children died outside. His hands tightened into fists, his heart burning with anger and guilt. He whispered to himself, if command won't help them, I will. He stood up slowly, checking his weapon and pack, his mind already made up. The rules didn't matter anymore. There were moments in a soldier's life when orders had to be broken to protect what truly mattered. This was one of those moments. He walked quietly toward the door, but a soft voice stopped him. "Where are you going?" Lyra asked, her eyes half open, tired but alert. Elias turned back, his tone calm. "To get what you need." Her voice trembled. "You mean the depot?" "That place is death, you can't." He smiled faintly. "You said that about meeting me too." Lyra sat up, her baby still asleep in her arms. "If they catch you, they'll kill you." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll just have to be faster." Before she could reply, he crouched beside her and placed something in her hand. It was a small emergency beacon, glowing faint blue. "If I don't come back by dawn, press this," he said softly. "My ship will track the signal and extract you and your child." Her hand shook as she clutched it. "Why do this for me?" He paused, eyes gentle. "Because no one else did." Then he stood and walked out into the cold. The streets were silent, moonlight spilling across the broken stones. He moved like a shadow, armor dimmed, footsteps silent. Every sound echoed too loud in the empty world. He reached the perimeter of the depot again. Watching from the darkness, searchlights swept across the yard. Guards moved between crates. Drones hummed above like insects. Elias crouched low, scanning the layout through his visor. His heart beat steady, calm, focused. He found an opening near a collapsed wall where rubble formed a slope. Sliding down quietly, he entered through a hole in the fence. The smell of fuel and metal filled the air. Rows of aid crates towered around him, stamped with human insignias. He opened the first one carefully. Inside were medical packs, sealed food units, and baby formula. He let out a short breath of relief, whispering, "Still good." He loaded what he could into a hover cart, silent but heavy. Each box felt like justice in his hands. Then a sound, footsteps. Coming closer, Elias froze, ducking behind the crates. 2 alien guards walked past, talking softly in their own language. Laughing, he waited until their voices faded, then moved again, faster this time. He filled the cart until it could hold no more as he turned to leave. A sharp electronic chirp cut through the air. An alarm sensor had detected movement. Red lights flared, sirens wailed. Drones lifted from their pads with blinding lights. "Unauthorized intruder detected," a cold automated voice echoed. Elias muttered under his breath. Too late to be quiet now. He pushed the hover cart forward, sprinting across the yard as beams of plasma fire lit up the night. Explosions shook the ground, smoke rising as he dashed through the gate. He fired back only when necessary, hitting drones with precise shots. A beam grazed his shoulder plate, burning the armor but missing flesh. Pain shot through him, but he kept running. The hover cart hummed beside him, its engines whining under the weight. He reached the alley where the tunnel began, ducking under falling debris behind him. A blast threw fire into the sky. He didn't look back. He reached the shelter just before dawn, his armor scorched, breath ragged. Lyra gasped as he stumbled in, dragging the hover cart behind him. Inside were boxes of food, medicine, blankets, formula, everything the city had been denied. She covered her mouth, tears flooding her eyes. "You did it," Elias smiled weakly. "Told you I'd be faster." He collapsed to one knee, pain shooting through his arm where the armor smoked. Lyra rushed to him, pressing a clean cloth against the burn. "You're hurt," she whispered. He shook his head. "I've had worse." The baby stirred, opening his small eyes, blinking at the new warmth and light filling the room. Lyra fed him from one of the formula packs, tears still falling for the first time. The child drank without shaking. Elias watched, leaning back against the wall, exhaustion washing over him in that small, ruined room. Surrounded by the echoes of war, a tiny piece of peace finally bloomed. But outside, the city was waking up. The explosion had been seen, the alarms reported. Council patrols were moving, searching, tracking the intruder's trail. Elias knew it wouldn't be long before they found him. He looked at Lyra, her child safe now, and said quietly, "They'll come here soon." Her face paled. "Then we'll run." He shook his head. "No, if you run, they'll follow. You need time." He looked toward the door, his hand tightening on his rifle. "I'll give you that time." Lyra shook her head desperately. "No, please, you've done enough." Elias smiled faintly. Not yet. The baby made a small cooing sound, and for a moment the tension faded. Elias touched the small child's head, gently whispering, "Stay strong, little one." Then he stood, loaded his weapon, and walked toward the dawn light spilling through the cracks in the wall. The sound of approaching engines echoed in the distance. Lyra watched him go, her heart breaking with every step. He never looked back because he knew some choices can't be undone, and this one would define them all, the Council's judgment. The first light of morning crept over Vareth's skyline, turning the smoke-filled air golden and gray. Sirens echoed through the broken streets, louder now, closer. Elias stood at the edge of the ruined district, rifle in hand, armor scarred and blackened. He could already see the patrol lights sweeping between the towers. Searching for him behind him deep in the shelter, Lyra clutched her baby, her heart pounding.
She could hear the distant hum of hover engines.
The rhythm of soldiers marching. Elias looked back once, their eyes meeting for the last time before the storm. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "No matter what happens, don't come out until it's over." Lyra's lips trembled. "You'll be killed." He smiled faintly, then let them try. Moments later, armored vehicles surrounded the ruins, loudspeakers crackled. A harsh voice calling, "Human soldier, surrender immediately. You are violating interspecies law." Elias stood tall in the middle of the street, his weapon lowered but his resolve unbroken. He could have run, but he didn't. He wanted them to see his face, the face of someone who refused to turn away from suffering. Dozens of alien soldiers aimed their rifles at him, their helmets reflecting the dull sunlight. He raised his hand slowly, his armor still smoking from the night before. The commander of the patrol stepped forward, sneering, "You've stolen from the Council." "Human," Elias answered calmly. "I took what was stolen already." The commander's eyes narrowed. "You think you can defy the Council?" Elias said quietly. "If they let children starve." Then yes, the soldiers grabbed him roughly. Binding his hands with magnetic cuffs, he didn't resist, his eyes steady as they dragged him toward the transport. He saw the bright banners of the Varethian Council fluttering over the city dome ahead, the place where justice was supposed to live, but had long since died. Hours later, inside the grand hall of the Council, Elias was forced to his knees. The chamber was vast, lined with tall alien figures in flowing robes, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Each counselor sat behind a curved desk made of silver glass. Their voices murmured like a swarm of insects, cold and distant. One of them finally spoke. "Commander Elias Ward of the Human Alliance, you stand accused of theft, sabotage, and violation of planetary law." Elias lifted his head slowly. "And mercy, don't forget that one." The hall went silent. The lead counselor leaned forward, his face hidden behind a golden mask. "You presume to lecture us?" Elias replied. "No, I'm reminding you what the word peace used to mean." The counselor slammed his staff against the floor, the sound echoing, "You brought war to this galaxy, and now you dare question our rule?" Elias met his gaze. "I ended a war, but you kept it alive. Only now you fight with hunger instead of weapons." Gasps filled the hall. Murmurs rippled like wind. Guards moved closer, but the counselor raised a hand to stop them. He smiled behind his mask. "You speak boldly, human. But words will not save you," Elias answered. "No, but maybe they'll wake someone else," and someone had already heard. At the edge of the crowd gathered to witness the trial, a small voice whispered, "He saved my baby." The guards turned as Lyra stepped forward, her baby wrapped tightly in her arms. Her face pale but fearless, she pushed through the onlookers, ignoring their gasps and whispers. When she reached the center, she knelt beside Elias. Her voice trembled but did not break. "You accuse him of crimes, but he is the only one who remembered mercy." The counselor's voice grew cold. "Who are you to speak in this chamber?" Lyra lifted her chin. "A mother you left to die." The silence that followed was heavy. Her words hung in the air like fire, burning through the hall's cold order. She turned toward the crowd, her voice growing stronger. "You call yourselves rulers of peace, yet you watched as our children starved. You took food meant for us and sold it for power. And now you call this man a criminal because he did what you should have done." Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. Others glared in fury. The golden-masked leader hissed, "Enough! Remove her." Guards moved forward, but something unexpected happened. The people in the chamber began to murmur, a low sound at first, then louder. voices rising from every corner. "She speaks the truth," someone shouted. "We all saw the warehouses," another voice joined. "My brother died waiting for medicine." More and more voices rose until the entire hall trembled with anger. Lyra held her baby high, the child cooing softly, his small eyes reflecting the chamber's light. "This child is proof," she said. "He lives because of him." Elias looked at her. Pride and sorrow mixing in his eyes, he whispered, "Lyra, stop. They'll turn on you." She shook her head. "Not today." The guards hesitated, their loyalty flickering as the crowd's outrage grew. For the first time, the council felt fear. Their control, built on silence and obedience, was cracking. The golden-masked leader banged his staff again, shouting, "Order!" But no one listened. The hall erupted in noise, cries for freedom, demands for justice, echoes of pain that had been buried too long. In the chaos, Elias stood slowly, his chains still glowing blue. He looked at the leader and said quietly, "You can't silence everyone forever." The counselor glared. "You'll die for this," Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe. But your truth dies first." Guards rushed forward again. But this time, hands from the crowd grabbed their weapons. The chamber turned into a storm of shouting voices and falling banners. Lyra reached for Elias, helping him stand despite his bonds. He whispered to her, "You did it." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "No, we did it." Outside, the bells of the city rang, not for ceremony but for change. The cries of the people echoed through the towers of Verith. And for the first time in years, the word justice meant something again. Elias turned toward the shattered glass ceiling. Light pouring through, the fight wasn't over yet. But hope was no longer silent. The star of hope, the chamber of the Verithian Council, burned with chaos. The golden banners of power had fallen, trampled under the feet of the people. Shouts and cries filled the air like thunder. The sound of rebellion had replaced the silence of fear. Elias stood in the center, bruised, his wrists still bound with glowing cuffs. The guards who once served the council now hesitated, their orders drowned beneath the voices of the crowd. Lyra stood beside him, holding her baby tight, her eyes glowing softly with determination. She had never imagined standing before the rulers of her world, yet here she was, defying them. The golden-masked leader shouted above the noise, "Silence! This is treason!" But no one listened. The people had waited too long, suffered too long. Truth had finally broken free. A bright beam of light suddenly cut through the ceiling as a human ship appeared overhead. Its engines roared, shaking the great hall. The human fleet had arrived, summoned by the distress beacon Elias secretly triggered before his capture. Dozens of sleek ships hovered above the city, their insignias shining through the smoke for the first time. The people of Verith saw that humanity had not forgotten them. The counselors panicked, shouting conflicting orders. "Shut down communications!
Seal the dome!"
But it was too late. The world was watching. Every word, every image was being broadcast across colonies and planets alike. The truth was no longer buried, it was alive. Elias turned to Lyra and smiled weakly. "You see? The galaxy is listening now." She looked at him, tears glimmering. "They'll free you, they have to." He shook his head slowly. "Maybe, but peace needs more than freedom. It needs memory." Suddenly, a shot rang out. A desperate council guard fired from the balcony, the blast striking near them. Elias moved instinctively, shielding Lyra and the baby. The energy bolt hit his shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Lyra screamed, falling to her knees beside him. His armor smoked, the wound deep but not fatal. Yet his strength was fading fast. She pressed her hands against the wound, sobbing, "Stay with me, please." "Stay," Elias coughed weakly, smiling despite the pain. "You still call humans strange?" Lyra nodded, her tears falling onto his armor. "The strangest of all." He chuckled softly, his voice a whisper. "Good. Then we did something right." Human medics rushed into the hall moments later. Pushing through the chaos, they freed Elias from his bonds, lifting him carefully outside. The people of Verith filled the streets, cheering, crying, raising their hands toward the ships above. The human fleet began distributing real aid, crates of food, medicine, warmth falling like silver rain. For the first time in years, the city smelled not of fire but of life. The golden-masked leader was dragged from his throne by his own guards. The people no longer feared him. The old order had fallen. Justice had finally come to Verith, carried by the courage of a mother and the mercy of a human. Days later, The skies of Vareth were clear again. The twin suns shone gently over the rebuilt square where thousands gathered. A small platform stood in the center, surrounded by flags of many worlds. Lyra stepped forward, her baby in her arms. Now healthy, strong, and smiling, beside her, still bandaged but standing tall, was Elias Ward, his uniform torn, his arm in a sling but his eyes full of quiet pride. The crowd fell silent as she began to speak, her voice calm and pure. This world forgot compassion, but one stranger reminded us what it means to be alive. He came not as a soldier, but as a soul who still believed in kindness. He gave food to the hungry and hope to the hopeless. He taught us that mercy is not weakness, it is strength. Applause rippled through the square. Elias lowered his head humbly, his eyes glistening. Lyra looked at him, smiling softly. You heard my cry when no one else did. And now the whole galaxy has heard it too. He reached out, touching the baby's tiny hand. She did most of the work, he said with a gentle grin. The baby laughed, a bright sound that made everyone smile. That single laugh became the sound of a new beginning. Later that night, Elias stood alone at the edge of the rebuilt city. Looking up at the stars, ships moved between them like silver fireflies, carrying aid and unity to other forgotten worlds. The air was cool, peaceful, alive. He heard Lyra's footsteps behind him, soft and familiar. You're leaving, she said quietly. He nodded. The fleet needs me, and there are more worlds like yours waiting. She looked up at the sky too, whispering, Will they listen? He smiled faintly. They will now. She placed her baby in his arms for a moment, the child staring at him with curious eyes. Elias felt the small heartbeat against his chest. Warm and steady, he whispered. You'll grow up in a better world, little one. Then he handed the baby back, his voice low and steady. Keep him safe, Lyra. You're stronger than you think. She nodded, tears shining in the starlight. And you're kinder than anyone said humans could be. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars above. Then Elias turned toward his shuttle, the engines glowing bright as the craft lifted into the sky. Its light reflected in the baby's eyes. Lyra whispered softly, Thank you, human. The wind carried her words upward, lost among the stars high above. Elias looked down one last time at the glowing city of Vareth. He whispered to himself. One cry heard. 1,000 hearts awakened, and as the ship disappeared into the endless night, the people of Vareth lit lanterns across the city, each one glowing softly, rising into the air like tiny stars. They called them the Lights of Elias. And from that night onward, whenever a child cried in hunger, someone somewhere always answered, because of one human who chose mercy over orders, because of one mother who refused to stay silent, and because of one small child whose voice had awakened a galaxy. The star of hope had been reborn, and it would never fade again.